Let's combat and fight back with maltracks. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maya.
A BB Toomey, a BB Fahodiye. Peace to all of my thinkers, truth speakers, and truth seekers. Welcome to another Truth to Power Talk with your sister, Dr. Ma'at. Thank you for joining another powerful discussion. And tonight I have with me another powerful guest, but he is no stranger to the community. Baba Ashra, Kwesi, Hotep Baba to you, a BB Fahodiye to you, Baba. How are you?
Oh, Santi, many thanks, my sister. Doing great. Still rising like Raleigh, live again.
Ashe. Well, Baba, glad to have you back on the platform. I called and reached out to you with all this stuff going on, all this controversial stuff happening. I said, I got to call Baba because this is Baba's lane right here, because you are the master teacher and the Jegna in this area. This is definitely your arena. So, family, you see tonight's topic. We're talking about who were the ancient Egyptians? Were the ancient Egyptians Black? Who are they? And it's sad that, even in the 21st century, that we're still having this conversation with all of the master teachers who have come and they've given us this knowledge. It's still up for debate. And so anyway, family, tonight we're going to be talking about that. And you already know, family, that, the motivation behind this discussion was Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart called the Egyptians Black. And now they want to cancel him, over in Egypt. They don't want him to come to Cairo to do a show. You have this group called the anti-Afrocentrism group. They don't want him to come. And so, family, we're going to be talking about that tonight. Who were the ancient Egyptians? Were these indigenous African people? Were they Black? Who were they? And so, family, take a moment out to thumb up this video. You know how the YouTube algorithm works. The more you engage the video, the more it begins to pop up on feeds. Make sure, family, that you share this video. Sharing is caring. Bob is going to drop a lot of information. And, this is his third time on the platform. And each time he's come through, he's had a mic drop interview, family. So make sure that you share this video, get the information out to the people. Also, family, if you have not subscribed to my channel, be sure to head on over to YouTube, because I know some people may be watching on various platforms. Head on over to YouTube, family. Okay, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so that whenever I go live, you will be notified. Also, family, for some of you who have missed some of these Truth to Power talks, I've created a Truth to Power talk playlist. Okay, a Truth to Power Talk playlist on my channel. Go back, check it out. I've had on Dr. Wade Nobles, Baba Ashra, Kwesi, Professor James Smalls, Dr. Darity. Everybody has come through. Anthony T. Browder, all of them, okay, have been on the platform, okay? And lastly, family, join me each and every Sunday for the Read Book Club. The book club will be starting back up on February the 9th. At 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be reading the book, They Were Her Property, by Dr. Stephanie Rogers. So make sure that you tune in. I see the Maadian family, Baba, is in the building, Baba. The Maadian family is in the building, Baba Meeks. I see you. What do you say, Baba? Hotep to the family.
To the African family.
Ashe, Baba. They're definitely in the building. I see Baba Meeks is in the building. I see Queen Mother Amina's in the building. Queen Mother, A Beautiful Mind, is in the building. I'm trying to see who else is in the building from the Maadian family. I see a lot of them. Danielle Rodriguez is in the building. There's a lot of them, Baba, coming through. So, family, let's get the views up. We got the master teacher among us. Let's get the views up, family. Share the show, like the show. So, Baba, the floor is yours. You can, if you want me to share your screen, I can at this point. But the floor is yours, Baba. Who were the ancient Egyptians? If you had to answer that, Baba, what would you say? Who are the ancient Egyptians?
Well, who are the ancient Egyptians is definitely African people. First of all, we're dealing with the fallopian tube. And what is the fallopian tube? We're talking about the fallopian tube of the Happy Valley. And the Happy Valley, which is called the Nile today, it does not start in Europe. The Nile does not start in Asia. The Nile starts in the heart of Africa. Our ancestors always honored, which they referred to as the Kui land, the land of the spirits. They honored that area because they understood where their beginning came from. In fact, Dr. Ben, the Grand Master Teacher, Dr. Ben, peace be upon him. May his spirit fly on the ancestors for eternity.
Mm.
Dr. Ben, who always quoted on the Papyrus of Nefer that we came from the beginning of the Nile where God happy dwelt at the foothill of the mountain of the moon, that being Kilimanjaro and also Rwenzori. I've been to both those places at the mountain of the moon. They call it mountain of the moon because it's a snow-capped mountain. The state that has snow on the top, that even when an Herodotus came there and the priest, he asked the priest, where does the Nile begin? And they said it started in the beginning of the mountain of the moon. Herodotus, the European historian, they call him the father of history, but not the father of European history. But he couldn't believe that there was a snow-capped mountain in Inner Africa. So that tells us that our ancestors always had a connection with Inner Africa. Now, of course, the whole thing of Egyptology started with the Europeans who came in, especially with Napoleon, who came in 1798 and came in during that particular period. And this is what started the whole thing of Egyptology when he came in and conquered the Mamelukes. Now, as time has gone on, we see that now they're trying to take Egypt everywhere. Said, or the beginning of Egypt started somewhere else in outer space. Now you got extraterrestrials. So the whole thing, it seems as though the fact that when you look at many of the scholars, even European scholars, like the Greeks themselves, who identified Egypt as being black for who they saw in their time. And they wrote about the fact that the Egyptians were black. In fact, Herodotus even said that they are, as in his description, burnt skin and woolly hair. Anybody that's going to live in the Sun Belt is going to have melanin, and melanin is color. And that is coming directly from the African continent. So again, when we look at now, we see that, as I said, that you can turn on History Channel right now, and they're talking about extraterrestrials built Egypt and everything else. But the fact that it seems more controversy in the fact that when it says that black people, okay, were involved in the building of ancient Egypt. So we want to look at the documentation from Europeans, because some are trying to make it look like that all this started with African people saying it. No, it was Europeans who were saying it. In fact, it was Europeans who had their own battle among themselves, who were discussing the African origin of the Egyptians, and others who were saying it had nothing to do with Africans. This is during the time of the slave plantation, when Africans were, our ancestors were on the plantations. Europeans were having this debate themselves, which I'm going to show in a few minutes. Okay, so to try to say that this is something that just recently came up is not the case, even though you had others like Liskowicz, who wrote who had her paper in a book that she wrote, Not Out of Africa. Again, when we look at the fact that now the science of anthropology is documenting that you wouldn't even have people on the planet Earth if it was not for Africa. So again, that's why I refer to the Nile as the fallopian tube, because it is there that our ancestors migrated down the Nile, and not only down the Nile, but migrated into Europe before there were any Europeans. We're talking about these early Grimaldis, okay, and migrated to Asia. All right, this is how you got the various people on the planet Earth itself. But even with that, Europeans have even come up, even though the science dictates that there's a monogenetic origin, or meaning one origin. But now the racism is now trying to make a polygenetic origin, that humans just sprang up simultaneously all over the planet Earth. But you don't find the fossils, okay, in other places of the planet like you find in Africa. And we're talking about Homo sapiens sapien 250,000 years ago, or even some of the early hominids, okay, like we see with Deknesh over 3.1 million years. And recently they found in Chad, who they give the anthropological name as Chadensius, okay, of 7 million years. So when we look at the African continent, it definitely see that there's only one monogenetic origin that started in Africa, gave birth. Okay, so how can we now deny that the Egyptians are black when we see the origin is coming up out of the fallopian tube of the Nile, where our ancestors reached the zenith of civilization right there in the land of Kemet that is now called Egypt today. So again, when these Europeans who got the white supremacist Egyptologists, should I say, I call it that because they're the ones that's trying to deny the African origin. In fact, there was a European female named Anne Roth, who was in fact a professor at Howard University. And she even came out and said, we got to teach the African students about our Egyptology, okay, meaning European white supremacy Egyptology, all right? And that's Anne Roth, okay? This is what she quoted in a paper a few years back. And this is which started the whole thing of trying to deny the African origin that is going on. But I want to get into visual documentation so we can follow this history. And by the way, in reference to the comment with Kevin Hart, all right, now keep in mind, I've been going to Egypt now for 42 years, and peace be upon him, Dr. Ben, as I mentioned his name earlier, our grandmaster teacher. I started with him in 1981 and did apprenticeship of 14 years under him. Okay, so traveling in Egypt, all Egyptians do not feel this way, okay? Because we got the social media, we got trolls out there, and people are interacting with the trolls. It's going back and forth and so forth. And of course, you got some Egyptians who are denying its African origin. And of course, as I said, there are many who do not agree with this. All right. Okay. So especially when we see the evidence all around us. So I'm starting with the slide right now. I don't know if that slide is up now.
We can see it, Baba.
Okay, great. So I have right there and I even with this little map right here of 200,000 years now recently in Ethiopia. And we've done educational tours, my wife and I, for many years in Ethiopia. And we see Adultu 250,000 years ago. Here we see the earliest Homo sapiens sapien, who did not start in Europe, did not start in Asia. It started right there in Africa. And there we see that he was found right there in Ethiopia. So here we see this is the earliest Homo sapiens sapien. As I said before, there were even early hominids that even go back even before him, as I talked about Dickenish. But again, that migration went out all over the planet Earth. Now, see if I got my thing working here. Can we see that slide there?
We can see it, Baba.
All right. We see that migration, okay, all over the African continent. That's why you see even in South Africa, you have some fossils, okay, that are just as old as Kenya and Ethiopia. And migrations to West Africa, as I said, these early Grimaldis who migrated into Europe, migrated to Asia. So it may be even hard to even think that, in fact, at one time, even the whole planet was a black planet. And that's even documented by European anthropologists themselves. Of course, like I said before, even though some of these European anthropologists try to deny that by creating a forgery called the Piltdown Man, they made a forgery of a fossil and tried to say that that was the origin. It started in Europe, and they found out that that was not the case. And peace be upon him, Grandmaster Teacher Dr. Cheikh Diop, who in fact validated that as well. But again, we want to deal with the Happy Valley. The Nile is called the Happy Valley in ancient times, right by our ancestors who called it happy. And also we have to look at the Abaye that James Bruce calls the Blue Nile coming out of the highlands of Ethiopia. Here are our ancestors. Now you're looking at this map. How can you say that the Egyptians are not black when we're seeing the Nile flowing from inner Africa, from the Great Lakes region around Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya? And we see Lake Nyanza that the Europeans colonial name called Lake Victoria. Without that Great Lakes region and without Lake Tana in the highlands of Ethiopia, there would not be Egypt. In fact, Egypt has always depended on the water coming from inner Africa. In fact, the very soil right now to this very day that makes up Egypt came from the soil that came out in the interior of Africa that is carried by the Nile. So even the delta of Egypt around the area of Alexandria and what is referred to as Lower Egypt, I'll talk about in a second, depends on that topsoil over the years. Even though they have built dams now, and then now the Nile, a lot of that topsoil has been back behind the dams, but in ancient times, the Nile carried that topsoil. So going back thousands of years, Egypt, in fact, sits on topsoil that came out of inner Africa. Now, again, we want to look at the name Kemet. Our ancestors, in fact, the northeastern part of Africa, okay, Egypt, here we see there are 54 countries on the African continent, and Egypt is one of them. I haven't seen anything yet that said that there's 53, there's 54, and Egypt is one of them. The ancient name was called Kemet, meaning black, Kemet Ta, referring to black land, Kemet Nu, meaning black people. That's why we call our Kemet Nu Tor, Kemet Nu, meaning black people. All right. So again, we see that the Greeks who refer to as Egypticus, this is how we get the name Egypt. When the Greeks who came in many thousands of years later, okay, and occupied Egypt, going back to Alexander around 332 BCE. BC. And also we see Mesarine, that's the Hebrew name for Egypt. And then we also see Mesorer, that's the Arabic name for Egypt. But the most ancient name was called Kemet. And as I said before, without the Nile coming from the interior of Africa, there would not have been an Egypt, as even today, Egypt consists of 90% desert. But I want to start with this book right here because it's a very important book, and UNESCO came together with scholars around the world and scholars from all over the African continent and also Egypt as well, and to document the general history of Egypt. And this book is book 2, Ancient Civilization of Africa. In fact, the editor of this book is Gamal Makhdar. Okay, he is an Egyptian professor. Now, this book was written in, I think it was in 1972. Okay, at this time, they did extensive research on the history of Egypt and the African civilization that was started there. And so, as you can see, the various scholars is talking about members of the International Scientific Committee, for drafting the general history of Africa. And this is UNESCO, okay, which is the acronym for the United Nations Scientific and Educational and Cultural Organization here. So you have all these scholars from different parts of the world, Nigeria, Ghana, Brazil, all of them were involved, Zimbabwe, Zambia. As you can see here, there's quite a few of them here. Okay, the UK, Tanzania, Somalia, who were all involved in creating and documenting the information of Africa. And also we see here the report of a symposium on the peopling of ancient Egypt and deciphering the Meroitic script. Okay, that's from ancient Kush. All right. Now look at the professors that we have here. Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, peace be upon him. He was also involved in that. We also see right here, at that time, it was called the Arab Republic. It was, peace be upon him, President Sadat, who said that this is Egypt. That's how we get the name Egypt today. Also, we see even the United States, but all these various people. In fact, here's Gamal Makhdar, again, the professor of Egypt. And also we see Professor Obenga, who's also involved from the Republic of Congo. So these are all the professors who are documenting the African origin of Egypt. In fact, some of the areas that they dealt with was the melanin dosage test and the osteological measurements or cranial cavity, blood groups. In fact, right here is points out either way, let us simply say that the evaluation of the melanin level by microscopic examination is a laboratory method which enables us to classify ancient Egyptians unquestionably among the Black races. Now, that's in that book edited by Gamal Makhdar, who is an Egyptian professor, okay, who is also involved in this book. And this is Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop's research, right? And the osteological, excuse me, just getting over a cold here, measurements of the cranial cavities among the criteria accepted in physical anthropology for classifying races. And they go on to say, by this criteria, the Egyptians belong among the Black races. This study was made by Lepsius, okay, at the end of the 19th century, and his conclusion remains valid. And also blood groups they dealt with. It is a notable fact that even today, Egyptians, particularly in Upper Egypt, okay, before the, along with the same group that was kind of cut off at the end, the same group B as the population of Western Africa on the Atlantic seacoast, not to the A2 group, characteristic of the white race. All right, so here they're giving an African origin from looking at the science of melanin, the osteological measurements, and the blood groups. Now, this European here who wrote Ruins of the Empire, his name is Count Constantine Divoni, who came to Egypt during the 1700s. And in his book, Ruins of the Empire, that it is said that Thomas Jefferson, by the way, refused to let his book be published in the United States because of this statement that he made right here in his book. At this time, this is a time that America was establishing their white supremacy system against African people. But this is what he says in his book. All the inhabitants have flat nose and thick lips. I was attempting to attribute it to the climate, but when I visited Sphinx, his appearance gave me the key to the riddle. On seeing that head, typically Negro, in all his features, I remember the remarkable passage when Herodotus in the 5th century BC says the Egyptians are black with woolly hair. That is Count Boney, who made that statement back then. He goes on to say, in other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type of all native-born Africans. Just think that this race of black men today are slaves, and the object of our scorn is the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, and even the use of speech. Just imagine, finally, the submissive of people who call themselves the greatest friends of liberty and humanity, that one has approved the most barbarous slavery and question whether black men have the same intelligence as white. This is Count Boney's book, Ruins of the Empire, during this time, identifying the Egyptians as Africans. And this is the colossal that he, in fact, was looking at. The puck shots, by the way, that you see all in his face during World War I, II, when many of the European soldiers would take shots at his face. In fact, it is said that even Napoleon even blew off his nose. Okay. Now, this is another European who was at Haru Akhet, that the Greeks refer to as the Sphinx, and his name is Baron Vivian Dinan. In 1747 and 1825, a French writer and archaeologist wrote, excuse me, in his book, okay, The Journey in Lower and Upper Egypt. The character, and this is what he describes, the characters of the Sphinx, okay, that the Greeks called Haru Akhet, is African. The lips are thick. Art was at a high pitch when this monument was executed. Now that is Baron Vivian Dinan, okay, in the 1700s, during the time that the slave trade was going on and the kidnapping of Africans, identifying the oldest and largest colossal on the planet Earth. This book here, Dr. Yusuf Yakinen, that we affectionately know as Dr. Ben, Black Man of the Nile. This is the first book I came across way back in the 70s. In fact, it was given to me by a sister. Her name is still up there in the corner, named Saba. I did not know that when I read this book, that I would be on this journey for 42 years. Dr. Ben, this is his first edition, but he also has many other books in a newer edition than this one. And he's connecting the whole cultural and ethnic connection with the Nile Valley, not only down and deep into Africa, around the Great Lakes region, the highlands of Ethiopia, showing the cultural connection as he always dealt with the phenotypes. As Dr. Ben always said, there's no one prototype that defines an African facial characteristic. That means we got wide nose, thick lips, and thin lips, various shades of black as well as very melanated Africans. This is his newer version of the cover for those who would like to get the book, Black Man of the Nile and his family, Dr. Yusuf Yakinen. And this is Dr. Ben's favorite spot. He would stop the bus when I worked with him right there as we were coming down the hill. And there you see Ra Haru Akhet. We're talking about the largest colossal on the planet Earth. They can't even give a date of how far back this colossal goes, even though many of the European Egyptologists have given a time period of the 4th dynasty, connecting it to Khafra, the builder of the second pyramid. But even though we see that in the Medu Neter, we see the name Haru Akhet, it does not say Sphinx on what is referred to as the dream stellar, because it was Menkaperad Tahutimes IV who fell asleep. And Haru Akhet came to him and said, dig me from the sand, because at that time he was covered up in the sand. In the 18th dynasty, we're talking about over 3,000 years ago. And he dug him from the sand and he became the next Nesu, or king. And that's the great story with him. But let's look at this colossal statue. Now, let's look at the phenotype. What are we looking at? Anyone who is Count Boney, as well as Baron Vivian Dinan that I just pointed out, who gave the description from their own eyewitness account, or even anyone who will go there and look up at this colossal and can see the phenotype that this is clearly an African colossal, the largest colossal on the planet Earth. And this is our group for many, many years, taking many brothers and sisters back. As you can see, the variations of the phenotypes, the various shades of black that we are as an African people, coming to the greatest colossal on the planet Earth, just like we see on the African continent. And again, what we do is take brothers and sisters from the group to compare them with some of the monuments and some of the pictures. And one brother, here we have him here, and we see him and do a comparison, and you can still see clearly, and looking at the phenotype of our brother right here, and look at Ra Haru Akhet, that the Greeks refer to as the Sphinx, and clearly see that this is an African colossal, as Count Avoni pointed out, as well as Baron Vivian Dunant. And, okay, so some of these, Tasseti is one of the oldest kingdoms. It's in Upper Kemet. When I say Upper Kemet, we're talking about the south. And we're talking about deep down into what is now referred to as Aswan or Nubia. But in ancient times, Upper Egypt would have been south of Menefer, okay, what is now called Memphis today. And north of Menefer, okay, that would have been looked at as Tamari. But again, we look at the features, and clearly we can see that looking at the phenotype, that these are clearly African features that we see here. In fact, when we come into the Archaic period and open up what is referred to as the first dynastic period, and we see the African Normer, okay, who from Upper Kemet, okay, during the Archaic period, as I said, of the first dynasty, and I have 3,200 years BCE or before the Christian era with a question mark. The reason is because, again, Europeans debated about the first dynasty, and they just drew a line in a time period of Maran Jehudi, who the Greeks referred to as, I forgot what the name the Greeks referred to him as, Menethos, Menethos. But the Kemetic name was Maran Jehudi. He gave a time period of 5,000 years BCE. All right. But the Europeans still have not been able to decipher the true history of ancient Kemet. So they just drew a line right in the middle. But clearly we can look and see anyone looking at the phenotype of Normer here, this Simatawi. A Simatawi is a unifier of the land. Okay. In fact, he built the world's first nation state. The United States is a nation state. All right. He built the first nation state right there in Kemet, now called Egypt today. When we look at Greece and Babylonia, these were known as city states, but it was he who built the first, talking about Normer, who built the first nation state during this particular time, as he is referred to as a Simatawi, because he united Upper and Lower Kemet during this time and even started hydraulic engineering. But again, we want to bring in other documentation on this, and let's go to BBC documentary on the Gift of the Nile, the history of Africa, with Zainab Badawi, okay, or Badawi, and see from her documentation from this BBC documentary what she is saying in reference to Normer.
The first recorded pharaoh was Narmer, seen here on the Narmer palette at Cairo National Museum. The Greeks called him Menes. It was he who united Egypt into a single entity around 3200 BC. This marked the early dynastic or archaic period of Egypt's history. King Narmer set up his capital at Hierakonpolis in the south. Now you can see from impressions of Narmer that he had obvious African features and didn't have a Mediterranean appearance.
So you see clearly that she's given this documentation from the BBC documentary on the Gift of the Nile. Now let's go to Zoser Neterket of the Third Dynasty, around 2600 years BCE, known as the First Golden Age. Excuse my throat. Again, we clearly see here he built the world's first stone building known as the Step Pyramid. And again, we can see by looking at the phenotype, clearly we can see who he is. In fact, he commissioned a multi-genius named Imhotep to build this pyramid for him. And Imhotep, who's known as a Tajeti, Kariheb, Shishata high priest teacher, and what is known as the Shishata or mystery system of the Third Dynastic period, and around 2600 years BCE, equally with a question mark because it is believed to be much older than that. But we're talking about he was involved in building the world's first stone building. In fact, he was a physician 2000 years before Hippocrates. Even though in Western education, this is not, in many cases, not mentioned, but it's mentioned of many of the Europeans and others. Okay, William Harvey, who said that he started the circulation of the blood, but Imhotep already knew that during his time, as he is known as a multi-genius during his time because he was an astrophysicist. He did so much that during that time. Sohora Nepka, the Fifth Dynasty, 2400 years BCE. He's a Nisu known and called the Sons of Ra. And he's from Ebu, Ta-Nehisi, deep down into Kemet. Now, clearly we're looking at his features here, and we can clearly see who he is. In fact, he is known for taking an expedition back to the Kui land, back to the land of the spirit. So our ancestors always acknowledged and looked at that as their homeland and returning back there, as well as others who returned back to the spirit land. We're talking about also Pepi. In fact, he had one of the earliest world-known first navies during his time, by the way. But this African right here, Neferkara, okay, and of the Pepi II, around 2200 years BCE, he eagerly got her Kuf to make an expedition in Inner Africa. So there was always a connection to this spirit land and understanding that beginning. In fact, he asked her Kuf to bring back a Twa, and that's told on the tombs of the nobles. Right there on one of the tombs where Harkuf left carved in stone a letter. Oh, he was so proud that his Nesu, or his king, Neferkara Pepi II, okay, commissioned him to make this expedition back to the Inner Africa to bring back the Twa, who were referred to as the dancers of God. And here's one of the Twa right here that Harkuf, who brought back to back into Kemet. Now we're going to go into the Cairo Museum, but before we go into the Cairo Museum, you see these little square blocks in the front of the Cairo Museum. And these square blocks are really starting with the first history that I just dealt with Norma, and is dealing with Khufu, Khafra, Menkaura, the builders of the pyramids. And it even comes down to the Greeks. It talks about Alexander, it talks about Aristophanes and many others. It talks about the Persians and also the others, conquerors who came in. But the one nation that's not on this plate is Kush. Kush is indigenous to the Nile Valley. In fact, it's Kush that is the mother, the beginning. In fact, the Fufa, one of the buildings in Kush deep down in Sudan, is even older than the pyramids itself. Now, on the front, we see is Cleopatra. Most people who think of Egypt with Cleopatra, but Cleopatra was during the Ptolemaic period. Okay, her father was Ptolemy Philadelphus. All right, now again, we know when the Greeks came in as conquerors, and like all conquerors who come in, when they conquer a country, then we see that there's rape of the women, miscegenation, and all these other things take place. All right, so now they did some research, and a documentary was on her, and they found that her bloodline equally is to Africa, as we dealt with the blood group that we dealt with a minute ago. So, but she should not be on the cover because she was not the last indigenous ruler. Okay, we would say Nectanebo, all right, would be considered the last indigenous ruler of ancient Kemet, not Cleopatra, because that was during the time of the Ptolemaic rule. But as we come in and we see that these European Egyptologists at this time of the colonial period, and it's still going on, robbing treasures out of Egypt. In fact, some people say you got to go to Europe to see Egypt. So the whole issue about Africans, okay, the Egyptians being ancient Egyptians being called Africans, when we see the stolen loot that is still going on to this day, and it was going on during the time when the Europeans came in and robbed and stolen many of the treasures. But also, equally we see that what's going on is the fact that now they want to distort the ethnic identity of who the people are. And as sad as it is, on the second floor of the Cairo Museum, I show our groups this plate, if Maspero, that's who that I just showed there. I don't think I said his name, but his name is Maspero. But the plate that he wrote is still there. All right, he was a curator of this museum, okay, in the late 18 and early 1900s. All right, this is the museum that they built to house the treasures of ancient Kemet. And this is what he says on this plate right here. I don't know, Sister Maud, can you see my arrow right there?
Yes, Baba, I see it.
Right. Okay, well, I'm starting. That's Maspero's name right there. I'm starting right there. Maspero suggested that Maharpra, who is right here, who is black, okay. Okay, start right here. Maharpra may have been the son of Thutmose IV and a Negress, okay. Now, there were no terms called Negress in ancient Kemet, but this is his own psychopathic racism that the European Egyptologists were establishing at this time. It goes on to say, at any rate, on the copy of the Book of the Dead, where they were calling it the Book of the Dead because they were robbing the tombs. And in the hands of the Kemetic people, they had, our ancestors, they had the scrolls, okay, to go into the afterlife. So they called it the Book of the Dead, when in fact it's called Per Emaru, or coming forth by day and by night. found in the tomb and now exhibited on the wall of this room. A harper is depicted with his face black instead of the normal red. Well, we're going to deal with the black and the red in a minute. Okay. A detailed examination of his mummy, which showed he died about 20 years of age, also showed that he was Negroid, but not actually a Negro. All right. So again, he can see that by looking at the fact that Negroid, but not actually Negro, that anyone who's looking at him can clearly see that he's black. But he's going to make it clear to distort your own mind or what your own eyes see that he's Negroid, but not actually a Negro. So this was the early beginning of the distortion and creating and taking away the blackness of ancient Egypt. In fact, when we see the dua is the adoration for the spiritual Asar that we see right here of salvation and resurrection. And we see here again, a harper showing his hands up in the adoration, okay, for Asar. Now, he's black and Asar is jet black. When you look at the spiritual ancestors and showing the spiritual Netarus or divine entities, they're all shown as jet black. Even Amun that we say at the end of our prayers is coming from Kush. In fact, it's coming from the great mountain that is referred to today as Jebel Bakel, that is called Jua. All right. So again, the black Netarus are coming from Inner Africa. So clearly we can see the blackness. And this is what Maspero wants you to see him as something other than that he's Negroid, but not actually Negro. And that's what is referred to, peace be upon him, as Bobby Wright referred to as psychopathic racism. So this book here, Black Spark, White Fire, okay, Richard Poe put out here. And this is now the beginning of these European psychopathic racist Europeans who started to create and distort, okay, the ethnic identity of the ancient Comedians. And this is Josiah Knott he lived around 1804 to 1800. I've got another date there. I've got it cut off there. And George Glidden, 1809 to 1857. And in the book, it talks about Egyptologists Josiah Knott and George Glidden suggested that the old Egyptians had arisen from a separate and unique African race, one that possessed some black features, but shared no actual kinship with the true Negroes. In other words, this mysterious race had a Negro appearance, but no Negro blood. So this is what started this during this particular period. So let's go inside the Cairo Museum and see Nima Atra Amenhotep III of the 12th dynasty around 1800 years BCE, Wasetian from Upper Kemet. All right. Even today, when you go into Upper Kemet, you see the people are very, very melanated, even to this very day. And he's in the back room of the Cairo Museum, and we take our groups back there to see him. And we want to take a look. Sorry, that slide is not moving. That is a very important slide, but I'm sorry it's not moving. So, but coming into the Cairo Museum, we're looking at the great Nesus, the great Comedians, African Comedians. But here's at least a slide of Amenhotep that I was going to show. And like I said before, we have brothers and sisters, okay, to show that phenotype. And we ask brothers and sisters to get right next to the colossal statues. And we clearly see, again, looking at Amenhotep and looking at one of our brothers here. And you see equally with Amenhotep with his nose, it seems as though the nose have always been knocked off. But again, anyone looking at that phenotype can clearly see that this is an African colossal, as you see the Africans who came back with us, our brother who came back with us to see his ancestor. Now, here's a Nigerian who played Samson. Now, here's another statue that you see here of Amenhotep, and here's locks. Now, who has locks? And we see Amenhotep again, and we see the Nigerian playing Samson. And look, I mean, you're looking at the same phenotype. He's black, Amenhotep's black. Clearly, he's a great Nisu, Amenhotep, during the time of the Middle Kingdom. We're talking about over 4,000 years ago. And this is what Europeans are trying to distort. Like Amenhotep, we see of the Amenhotep III of the 12th dynasty around 1800 years BCE, Wasetian from Upper Kemet. As I said, even to this very day, we see that the people are very melanated in Egypt. Now, let's look at the Webster's New International Dictionary, okay, of the English language, based on the International Dictionary that they had in 1890 and 1900, okay? And let's see what they have in here. As much as I hate to show it, but I'm going to show it to show you that how they identified at this time the Egyptians. Now, we shouldn't use the word. If we want to still stay on the mental plantation, we say the word. But I'm going to say the N word. Here, they have the N word in this dictionary. And what does it say? Member of any very dark-skinned race. As an East Indian would be the N, a Filipino would be the N, and an Egyptian would be referred to as the N. That's what they had in 1890 and 1900. The Egyptians referred to as the N word in Webster's New International Dictionary. Okay, and there is clear so you can see it. Now, let's look at Mentuhotep. Clearly, he's black. You just saw what they had in the New International Dictionary. Again, we can see he's wearing the deshret. Okay, that's the red crown of Lower Kemet, as we see him right there. And we have our brothers. We take them out of the group. And for those who we feel that even looks like, here we see Mentuhotep right here in the Cairo Museum. And now we see, and this is the statue of Happy. When we talk about the Nile Happy, these are two statues of Happy, referred to as the Nile in locks. And we have sisters who we pull out the group to look just like Happy, as we see right here with their locks. So even the Nile itself is showing, again, African statues, representing in a human form of the Nile, representing as Happy. So all these various features that we see here, and all of them we see always with their nose knocked off, but clearly we can see the phenotype of these Africans of the Nile Valley. As I said, we see the variations of the phenotype because, again, who gave birth to humanity? It started in Africa. Drusilla Dungy Houston, who wrote her book way back in the 1930s, and she wrote The Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire. And she points out the Egyptians in later days affirmed that their civilization came from the black tribes of Punt. Okay, that's down along the Somali coast. And she also goes on, it did not come from the north or the east, but must have been imported from the south, as Budge, okay, a European Egyptologist, affirms Egyptians had all the characteristics of an African race. Now, these I see Europeans, they either have it on or off. Either they're Africans or they're not Africans. In this case, Budge is affirming that the Egyptians are African race. Now, oh, sorry about that. But the invasions that came in, one of the earliest recorded invasions are known as the Hyksos, known as the Euro-Asiatic, who came in from the north. Okay, some an area they refer to as Mitanni, which would be around Turkey or Iraq, or that area, around 1675 BCE. So this is one of the earliest invasions. And this is who the people look like that came down into Kemet. They were there for approximately 200 years. Okay, that's 200-year time period they were there. In fact, enslaving the Kemetians of the Nile Valley during this time, or at least during the time of the Lower Kemet, where they occupied, until we see that the time period of the 17th dynastic period of the Second and Tiles. This is the history of Kemet and Kamose, who came up from the south, who came up from Upper Kemet to defeat these Hyksos and kick them out of the land during this particular period. So we see here that the Hyksos who came in, but it was the Second and Tiles and Kamose who lost. In fact, it was Second and Tiles who lost his life on the battlefield. But Thutmose's brother, that's Neb-Peri-Ra Thutmose, around 1500 years BCE of the 18th dynasty. Awaseti, and again, notice they're all coming from Upper Kemet, who was the liberator, the emancipator, who forced the Hyksos out. In fact, it is said that this is the only documentation of a large group of people being expelled out of Egypt. In fact, a European Jewish historian said that they took from Thutmose, and the story of Moses, they took from him, because that's the only documentation of a large group of people being expelled from Kemet, when Neb-Peri-Ra Thutmose expelled the Hyksos. And someone came and turned that story around. But that's another story for another time. And this is his Neter Hemp. That's referred to as divine wife. As you see, her is jet black. She's very melanated, and she's always seen as very melanated. Men-Kheperra Mays of the 18th dynasty, 1400 years BCE. And here I had to go to England to one of a great picture colossal statues, but some of the best colossal statues of ancient Kemet are in European museums, especially the British Museum and also the Louvre. And in fact, when the British came in and took a lot of the treasures off of the French, who stole a lot. So in fact, when they were after the French on the Mediterranean Sea, you had one thief chasing the other thief. But a lot of these treasures we see in the European Museum came from the time period when they came in and stole these colossal statues up out of Africa, just like African people were stolen from the African continent. So in many cases, we see these colossal statues of Menkaperatu Dayz. He's famous because he had 17 battles and won them all. He wanted to make sure that the Hyksos invasion was not going to come back into Kemet. But when I was in the British Museum, minding my own business and taking a picture, a European lady came up behind me and said that the Egyptians are not black. So I made a comment while some of them were standing there. I said, well, let's have a lip measuring contest. And they all ran away. But again, that's another story. So we see him, a closer view of Menkaperatu Dayz, and the phenotype. Clearly, we can see what it looks like. But again, you have to go into the British Museum and see all the stolen treasures. So I think all the concentration should be with Egypt trying to get the stolen treasures back that are housed in the European museums. But if they take these treasures out of European museums, they won't have nothing to show the people. Again, because Europe has no ancient history compared to that of ancient Egypt. That's why the European Egyptologists are trying to now make it white. Ned Ma'at Ra Amenhotep III of around 1300 years BCE, known as our dazzling sun, the diplomatic Sultan, or also known as Nisu. And here the European racist Egyptologist said, well, the reason why he looks this way, because he suffers from glandular disease. So this is some of the racism, everything that they brought up to deny the ethnic identity of these Kemetic Africans of the Nile Valley that we see right here. And this is a side view, front shot, side shot. Okay, some of us are familiar with how that's done. And again, this is his son, okay? And that's Amenhotep IV, okay, known as Neferkeperu Wa and Ra, that he changed his name to Akhenaten because at this time he's worshiping the Aten. And Europeans try to say, well, he started monotheism, or the concept of one God. That was already known in Africa going way back and all the way to the pre-dynastic, as Petrie referred to as pre-dynastic times, and also coming up into the spiritual deity, whether it's Amen or Ptah, depending on what period it is. And this is, again, Queen T, and this is Amenhotep III's wife. Now, she looks just like my mother. Same complexion, everything, as we see her right here, Queen T. And she was the world's first Secretary of State. My wife has an excellent presentation that she deals with the goddesses and the queens. Now, National Geographic came out and said the Black Pharaohs of Egypt. So they're talking about the Black Pharaohs. And in the book, National Geographic, this was in 2008 on page 39 and 40. And look what they put here, the Kushites, okay, which is the blackest part of the Nile Valley down in the Sudan. The Kushites surely belong to the Caucasian race. Okay, it goes on to say, for decades, many historians flip-flop. Either the Kushite pharaohs were actually white. So they're trying to make everything white. Okay, this is part of the racism. This is the whole. So now here we see Kashada of the 24th dynasty around 760 to 747 BCE. He was a Kushite Nubian ruler of Napata. His influence extended as far as Waset, that is now called, that our ancestors referred to as Waset, that the Greeks referred to as Thebes, is now called Luxor. Now, look clearly at his features and see that you're looking at the phenotype of an African of the Nile Valley, not no European Caucasian. And now here we see that Egypt and we see Africa. And in between there, we see a red line. Now, right there's an area called Aswan. Okay, that's where the Nubians live today. And you see what is now referred to as Lake Nasser, the lake that was that they created there, okay, for water for Egypt. Now, here we have who created this whole thing that Egypt was not in Africa. Because sometimes you got people today who still refer that Egypt is not part of Africa. As I said, there's 54 countries on the African continent, and also Egypt is one of them. Well, we have to go to this guy, okay? His name is George Wilhelm Frederick Hegel, okay? He lived around 1770 to 1831. A German philosopher said in his philosophy of history, The northern part of Africa belongs to the European world. Egypt does not belong to Africa. Excuse my throat. As I say, just getting over a cold. So here, this is what started this. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel is the one that said Egypt is not, said it's part of the European world. Everything that we see with the zoop types that you see on the monuments and temples are all coming from Inner Africa. When we're looking at the various animals that our ancestors saw spiritual science through Mother Nature. And now he's saying it's part of the European world. So this is where you see now Egypt right above that we see right here and Africa down below. So they said, this is the European world and this is Africa. And they drew a line right here. So again, this is now, peace be upon him, as Dr. Clark said, they're colonizing the mind. So when you go into the New York Metropolitan Museum, this is why you see here Egypt and Africa. They created that by separating Egypt out of Africa and now trying to take Kush, that is now called the Sudan, and saying that's a Caucasian world. And so now this is how it's viewed today. And in the minds of many people, because of this racism, that's how they would say Egypt is not part of Africa because of what Hegel did during this time period. So now we look at that red line here. This is Menefer that the Greeks called Memphis. All right. This is referred to as Lower Kemet. All right. During the time of the Old Kingdom, south of that, this was all Upper Kemet, where all those Nisus or kings that I just showed came from this area. All right. The heart of Kemet, down here in the blackest part of Kemet, even to this very day. So we see Lower Kemet and we see Upper Kemet. This area was called Tamari. Down here was called Ta-Nehisi. And when we go into the museum, we see the Ta-Nehisi from Upper Kemet, very melanated, jet black. And then we also see that in Lower Kemet, we see the soldiers here. This is referred to as Tamari, Lower Kemet. They're a lighter complexion, all right, because they're in the northern part. But down in the south, we see very more melanated, but they're all Africans. Now, let me say something here. If we go to Asia, and we go to the northern part of Asia with the Chinese, they're a lighter complexion than Bangkok and Thailand. Is that right, Dr. Maud?
Absolutely, Baba.
Okay, but they're still referred to as a people as a whole as what? Asians.
Yes, absolutely, Baba.
One's in the north and one's in the south. Okay, you got Chinese, you got Bangkok, but Bangkok here in Mindanao, southern part of the Philippines, very dark, very melanated, but they're still all called Asians collectively. When you go to Europe, you have in Greece, you have Sicilians, you have Italians. They're a darker hue of white than you have the Swedes. Is that correct? Dr. Mott?
Yes, Baba. I was shaking my head, but you didn't see me. Yes,
no, I can't see you. I can't even see myself in the.
Yes,
right,
Baba.
So I can only see the picture. So here you see that they're bleach blonde hair, blue eyes, and pale skin in Norway and Sweden in those areas, correct? Dr. Mott?
Yes, Baba. Yes, Baba.
When we come down to the Sicilians and the Italians, they're generally a darker hue of white, black hair generally. Is that correct?
That's correct, Baba.
And they're all referred to as what?
Italians, right?
Europeans.
Europeans.
Yeah, we look at them collectively as Swedes and Norwegians and all those people. They're still looked at as Europeans, even though they're Italians, okay, Greeks and so forth. They're all Europeans. So how is it that we can go to Asia and see a lighter complexion, a darker complexion, still called Asia, but when we come and go to Europe and see a darker hue of white in the southern part, but they're very white in the northern part, but they're still looked at as Europeans. But we come to Africa, and now they're saying that these are not Africans, and one group is referred to as African, now referred to even the Kushites or Ta-Nehisians are referred to as Caucasians that I just showed you when I showed the National Geographic. So here we see the blatant racism trying to remove the ancient history of Africa, because Europe has no ancient history going back thousands of years. Even when the Romans went into Europe, they talked about the barbarians of the Germanic tribes during even the Roman periods. But when Charles G. Seligman in 1930 wrote in his book, The Races of Africa, now this is what he put. The Egyptians, Nubians, and Ethiopians are black Caucasians called Hamites. So again, now you see the various shades of black that you see here. And now the Ethiopians, are now looked at as black Caucasians called Hamites. This Hamite thing was created equally out of racism. It was created out of the Noah story because he was drunk and naked, and Ham observed him in this condition, then cursed be his offspring, Canaan. So Egypt is even referred to as the people of Ham, and Ham is the cursed people. All right. So this is where you see this negativity that was created in the Western religions. All right. In terms of making black cursed, when it was an allegorical racist myth that they actually created. So even Egypt is looked at as one of the 4 sons of Ham. Okay, so again, as I said before, one of the names, the Hebrew name for Egypt was called Mesrer. So again, it was looked at as the land of Ham and the cursed one. So again, this is part of the psychopathic racism, even through the religion that we see. But we look at the various phenotypes. Now look at here, as I said, Charles Seligman is referring to the Egyptian, Nubians, and Ethiopians as black Caucasians. So let's look. We see she's a little bit lighter melanated. Now let's go deep down into southern part of Ethiopia, and we see the hammer. We see the hammer here. Oh, whoops, I did something wrong here. Sister, did I leave the picture here?
Yeah, just go back to your slides, Baba, if you can.
Okay, let me go back here.
Yes, yeah, there you go. And then click on, there you go. Mm-hmm.
So you see, this is the hammer. I've been to this land. I've been to that area. You see the same hairstyle, the same complexion. Now let's go and look at another sister who's a little bit more melanated. It's just like in my own family, okay? I'm a lighter complexion, but I have a sister who looks just like the Cushite sister right here. Variations of blackness, of shades of black, okay? Even in my own family. And that's our own family, even on the African continent that we see right here. And now Charles G. Seligman said that they are black Caucasians. Again, we're looking at the blatant psychopathic racism here that we see of our ancestors of the Nile Valley. When you look at, again, the murals, you see jet black melanated brothers here. And we see, again, a lighter shade that we see here, the variations. I've traveled throughout the African continent. That's the beauty of African people. You see the various phenotypes. You see the various shades of black depending on where our ancestors live, like down in Kush. Okay, we look in that area and what is now called the Sudan, because of the sun Ra in that area, you're going to have a lot more melanin. And we see that even on the murals to this very day, we see the variations, even with our brothers that I know, my friends here, Jamal, who's very melanated. And also we see Kareem, who's a lighter melanated. But they are both Africans of the Nile Valley. That's what we see right here. So again, as I conclude with the presentation, and I have Dr. Ben's book that I started with earlier, and he shows the whole cultural highway. We see the variations coming up to how you're going to have a Nile, 4,000, approximately 200 miles of the Nile, and then all of a sudden start the beginning only in Egypt. When we know people migrate along the rivers. And here we see the fallopian tube, which is the Happy Valley itself, coming from the Atbar, okay, and also from the Amadaye, known as the Blue Nile, as well as the Happy Nile, known as the White Nile today. This is the cultural highway that we see right here that makes this all one African family. As Dr. Ben pointed out in his book, this is the book, the newer version of it, Black Man of the Nile. And here's another book of his, Africa, the Mother of Western Civilization, Dr. Ben, that we affectionately know him, Dr. Joseph Inyakinen. And here's another one, Cultural Genocide in the Black African Studies Curriculum. Also, Dr. Chancellor Williams. We need to read these books. We need to keep the community bookstores open because now many of these books are out of print and cost a lot of money to reprint these books. This is Destruction of Black Civilization by Dr. Chancellor Williams. Peace be upon him as well. Peace be upon Dr. George G.M. James, The Stolen Legacy, where he talks about how the Greeks, when we see, got their knowledge from ancient Kemet. And Western academia, who we deify, Archimedes and all these other Greeks, Socrates and Plato. And in fact, they all came and plagiarized the Pythagorean theorem. He got up out of Kemet. So this is the fear of the unlocking the sacred knowledge of the African Nile Valley. And also, peace be upon him, Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, in his book, The African Origin of Civilization. A Myth or Reality. He also has the book on Barbarism or Civilization. And peace be upon him, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Egypt, a Child of Africa, which he has several journals that he put together on this. Our book, my wife and I, Mary Ra, our book, The African Builders of Civilization, a pictorial history of famous personalities of ancient Kemet. So we can see who they are, give a brief background on them, and see the phenotype of who they are clearly without dealing with all types of psychopathic racism that was started by the European Egyptologists to deny the African origin. And this is a good DVD as well as digital that can go along with that book, okay? And that is the ingenuity and spirituality of Africans in pyramid building, that I deal with not only the Africans who built the pyramids. It had nothing to do with aliens, and it had nothing to do with slaves or any Jews building the pyramids. But these were the Kemetic Africans of the Nile Valley. And this is a DVD as well as a digital DVD that you can get as well. And the whole Nile Valley, this one here from the ancient Kushites to the Black Lions, that we deal with. My wife and I put this DVD together, and it's on the whole Nile Valley, not only Egypt, but also Kush, now called Sudan, also Ethiopia, and showing how that whole cultural highway, and showing the connection and dealing with the various, not only Africans and the phenotype, but also the various symbols that we see, the zoop types that we see, all are connected with Africa. That has nothing to do with Europe that we see on the monuments and temples, and showing the spiritual connection that our ancestors had. So as I conclude this, I did not know when I made the first journey in 1981 to Kemet that I would be on a 42-year journey. Okay, making that journey with Dr. Joseph and Yakinen back then. Now, many going on over 4 decades now, and doing apprenticeship under him for many years, and continuing to work, as Dr. Ben is very well known in Kemet. And he has literally taken thousands of brothers and sisters back over the years. And so this is on symposiums. It has been an honor over the years to lecture with him on the African origin of civilization and religion, as he's been our grand master teacher, and in many years of lecturing with him on college campuses. In fact, Mary Ra, I met my Netter Hemp, that's referred to as, the Kemetic word is divine wife, in Kemet, okay, on Dr. Ben's tour. And he actually did our marriage ceremony right there in Kemet. So we conduct the educational tours ourselves back to Kemet every year. So that's the conclusion of the lecture, sister. Dr. Maat, I don't know if how do you bring me back up again?
Yeah, I got you, Baba. Just all you had to do is exit. All you had to do is exit out of the screen that you're sharing, and,
I'm not familiar with
and look back. But we see you lot. I took it off, Baba, so you're good. We see you.
I'm going all over the place now. So
no worries, Baba. We're looking right at you, so you don't have to.
Okay, there's my face again.
Yeah.
Okay, there I am.
All right, Baba. And so hold on, I
had a little sorry for a little cold and throat thing here.
Oh no, Baba. I gotta do this for you. Hold on.
Fire! 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 Fire!
Woo! This was another mic drop interview. Do you all agree in the chat? I want to see what you had to say about it in the chat, family. Baba, I think you did a phenomenal job, and I'm sure that the fire symbols are coming. They said much respect. They love it. They said Baba Kwesi still the man.
You're a man.
They said, look,
I'm glad I'm a man. I'm glad they see me as a man.
Baba Kim Ra. He said fire. Queen Mother Amina, she said, thank you so much, Baba Kwesi, for your stellar, hold on. She said, your stellar and historic educational presentation. I see Sister Ladoja right. She gave you the fire symbols, OD99 fire symbols. All right. Who else? Black Law said he came in late, but he gave you the fire symbols. Baba Gerald Meeks said, great. Baba, they just singing your praises. Baba, it's so many. I don't know if you can see it on your end. I'm just trying to put it up so you can.
I see some of them here. Yes, I do.
Yes, Baba. They said beautiful presentation, nice presentation. Truth Seeker said, this is what our young people need to hear. Brother Mark McDonald, red, black, and green. I see only one turtle love, red, black, and green. Baba, it's so much. I'm just going to show you all of I'm letting them roll, family, and trying to get them in so he can see them. Because over here, Baba, we always, we believe in giving you your flowers while you can smell them. Speaking of flowers, family, let's get into some righteous giving. Let's give into some righteous giving. Baba gave me his PayPal account. Baba gave me his PayPal account. I asked him if he had a Cash App. And Baba, you said you don't have a Cash App, right?
I have the PayPal.
Okay, I got it. So I just threw Baba's PayPal.
Sister Maud, Dr. Maud.
What happened, Baba?
So I'm trying to catch up on all the technology.
Oh, Baba, it's all good. It's all good. I'm getting ready.
I have PayPal.
Look, I'm getting ready to go to Zelle now. I had the PayPal, Cash App. I'm getting ready to move to Zelle. So, family, I just dropped Baba's PayPal address in the chat. Let's shower him with some love. Baba Imhotep calls it righteous giving. He was just talking to me about that yesterday. I was calling things donations. He said, let's just call it righteous giving. I said, I love that. I love that. I love that. So let's participate, family, in some righteous giving. Let's give our master teachers, our Jegnus.
Ma'ati and giving.
Yes, Ma'ati and giving. That's right.
Reciprocity. Just don't take.
That's right. That's right. Ma'ati and giving, family, or righteous giving, or however you want to qualify, family. But let's give him his flowers while he can smell them. And over here, that's what we talk about. Not waiting until our ancestors transition and say, "Oh, they was great." No, let's shower them with that stuff now. Let's shower them with that now, family. Let's shower them with it now. All right. And so anyway, Baba, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. Yes. Look, people say yes. Reciprocity with the fire symbols. Some Ma'ati and giving, family. Ashe. So Baba, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with my listeners and I tonight. Baba, I would love to bring you back to talk about the Exodus story. I would love you. I got to bring you back, Baba, just to have a discussion with you about the Exodus story. Let's talk about what it says in the Bible, and then let's talk about what really happened, Baba, because we need you, Baba. We need you. And so I'll reach back out to coordinate that with you. But thank you.
I have to be in Washington, D.C. on March 4th. So I can be on your program right before that to advertise that.
Okay, great. Let's do it.
Like we did with Brother Jabari.
Let's do it, Baba. Let's do it, Baba. We had 150,000 people in the building tonight, so we sure enough can do it, Baba. Well, Baba, it was really 150, but I always say 150,000. I gas it up a little bit, Baba. Let me hype it up a little bit, but it's 150. But I always say it's 150,000 people in the building, but it's 150. But it was a really, really good crowd, and I do appreciate everyone who tuned in. I appreciate everyone who thumbed up the video, who shared this video. All right, who thumbed it up, who shared it. Also, family, I already showed you that I have his DVDs, but I never showed you this book, did I? African Builders of Civilization, a pictorial history, right, of famous personalities from Kemet, ancient Kemet or Egypt, right? So I have it. Everything. When I tell you all to do something, I don't say, "Oh, get Baba's DVDs," and then I don't have the DVDs, or get Baba's book, and I don't have the book, right? So everything that I tell you all to get or encourage you to get, right? Because I can't tell you anything. Only thing I can do is encourage you. I make sure that I have it. I have it myself. All right. And so anyway, family, make sure that you share the show. Thumb up the show if you didn't. Okay. It costs nothing to thumb up the show. It costs nothing to share the show. Right. And I don't even like to say show, but the discussion. This was a powerful presentation, a powerful discussion. And so make sure, family, that you get the word out there. But Baba, let's definitely coordinate a date. If you have a flyer for the event in Washington, D.C., shoot that to me via email.
I do have one. I have to get that to you.
Shoot it to me and let's coordinate a date. And so, like you said, you come on, we promote the event, and we talk about, Exodus and what happened and while we're promoting the event. So, Baba, do you have any? Jacqueline, his PayPal is right here. Let me put it in here again, because I'm getting ready to shoot him some ends myself. Again, I don't ask you all to do anything that I don't do. Okay. I don't ask you all to do anything that I don't do first. Okay. So his PayPal address, family, is in the chat. Okay. Let's shower Baba with some Ma'ati and giving. All right. Some Ma'ati and giving. Let's shower him with that. Okay.
We do our tours every summer.
Yes. Kim and New. My moderators put your website in the chat. So while you were presenting, they just kept putting kimandnew.com. So family, make sure that you visit his website, grab the lectures, check out the tours. Bobby, you did say you're doing another tour in 2024, right? Or are you going this summer or next summer?
Oh, no. We do it every. I haven't missed the summer. Only one I missed was, of course, COVID in 2020. But we do it annually. So every summer we go. This year will be July 8th to the 22nd. And we have to do 2 tours because of the popularity of our tour. And the second tour will be July 24th to August 7th. And they're both 15 days each. Okay, so we have the lectures before you even get to the site, and a lot of information that we have, as well as a 4-day cruise to Nubia or Ta-Nehisi.
Oh, beautiful. And Baba, so we thank you. Adupe, Asante Sana, Dua.
My mentor Hemp is
Yes.
the business person, so she's gonna make sure she gets everything out to you right on point. She's on point. She had to help.
Oh yeah, I know how Mama gets. I know how Mama gets down.
Our brothers, see, we as brothers see the picture, but you know what, Dr. Mahat, we missed a lot of the details.
Yes, Baba. She came in. She said, "No, you have to click that right there, honey. You got to get that right there." So, but Baba, we thank you. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your dedication, to your commitment, to teaching us our history, our story, and so we preserving the legacy, and carrying the torch, for Dr. Ben. And you know how people say, I learned under Dr. Ben. Like I said, you don't see any pictures. There's no evidence. We looked at the pictures. We saw you right there with Dr. Ben. You did an apprenticeship for him under 14 years, 15 years?
14 years.
14 years. 14 years. And so, Baba, just amazing work that you and Mama are doing. And so again, I can't thank you enough for all that you have done and all that you are doing, for our people. And so we appreciate you, Baba. We love you all. And I look forward to speaking with you again. Baba, do you have any closing words for the listening audience?
Well, before I say that, I want to say, sister, we honor your communiversity, as Bobby Wright would call it. That's what we're having at communiversity here. So we want to say Asante Sana, many thanks. And Murray is the Kemetic word for love. We love what your program that you have. And I would like to say to the community, Teta Kemet Netter Ankh Senejeb. And the Kemetic words of Teta, everlasting, black, divine life, health, strength, and stability.
Ashe. Family, I don't know who I could bring on after this, because Baba, you just went like this. It was just one of those mic drop interviews. So I had to let the platform cool off.
I've calmed down in my older days now. So it's a good thing I wasn't here.
Baba, you still got the fire. That's why I said I don't know who I'm gonna bring on after this
interview. I'm the Kemetic would be a Sekhmet, as they refer to in the Western term, Sagittarius. So that's fire sign. So I can't help myself. I was born that way.
Yes, it was beautiful. So I gotta let the platform cool off a little bit, Baba, before I bring somebody else back on here. But Baba, again, thank you so much to my audience family. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that if you haven't subscribed, that you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell so that whenever I go live, family, you are notified. Also, if you feel like you already subscribed, please go back and check, because YouTube has been unsubscribing people to my channel. So there are people who are saying, "Oh, I thought I was subscribed to your channel, but I went back and checked, Doc, and I'm no longer subscribed." So family, make sure that you just double check it to ensure that you are subscribed to my channel. And if you're not, make sure that you resubscribe, right? So resubscribe and then hit the notification bell so that whenever I go live, you will be notified. And you know that I go live, sporadically, right? Like one day I just click the live button, Bob, and I just get on and start talking. So make sure that you hit the notification bell so that whenever I upload content or I go live or I post something on the community tab, that you get a notification. Thank you so much for tuning in, family. Make sure you share this discussion. If I don't go live again, you know what, Bob, I am going to be live tomorrow. But it won't be a Truth to Power talk. There's a brother who released a song, and it's like a reparations type of song. And so he's going to be on the platform, and we're going to be talking about reparations tomorrow night around 7 or 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So family, make sure that you tune in. And if I don't see you tomorrow or you don't tune in tomorrow, check out the archives and have a beautiful Black-tastic week. Peace, Black power, Abibi Fahodie, Abibi Tumi, Hotep, Amani Na Amandala. Peace. Hotep.
Let's combat and fight back with maltracks. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maya.